that with MOFGA certification, because this is certified organic illegal milk. Illegal because it's milked outside and all kinds of other things that
It's delicious.
So it's just not licensed.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's not particularly sanitary that it keeps longer than other people's milk. And it received a blue ribbon and a clean flavor comment at the fair. So anyway, for certification, to meet the pasture rule, when there were 4 droughts in a row, and other people got variances on the 3rd drought, and I didn't need a variance because my certifiers at MOFGA say that if stuff is dropped where it grew, and the animals are free to choose, that counts as the pasture rule. So when your pigs are eating acorns, that's part of the pasture rule, except they don't need pasture rule. But ruminants do, and if they eat acorns, part of the pasture rule. If they eat apples, part of the pasture rule. If I drop branches, while I'm on a goat walk, or if I drop branches and then bring them to it, and even put a paddock around it, that's the pasture rule. If the trees are in the pasture and I drop the branches to them, that's still meeting the pasture rule. If I carry them from the woods to the paddock, that's feeding them whatever you call rations. So it's key that they have choices and some freedom, and that the stuff grew right where it is being eaten. So that's how that happened. So I'm mostly going to be talking about woody plants, but some other stuff. So I want you to look at this picture. Can you see that there's darker green trees? Maybe I should have kept the more blinds down. But this one's not going down. Yeah. It was down before, but anyway. The darker green trees in that tree line were all pollarded. They hold their leaves longer. They don't turn.
They're all what?
They're pollarded. I canopy harvested them.
Okay, yeah.
So this is, in this tree, it's been harvested twice, and that's 1-year growth. So that's an ash. That's got 3-year growth. There's some other ashes. Yeah, actually there should be a pointer here somewhere. So I had one yesterday.
Yeah, I get it.
Anyway, over there there's 2 oaks. That one I think maybe has 3 or 4-year growth, and that one has 2 or 3-year growth. And then there's another ash here that's pollarded. Anyway, they're all darker green, and in the original photo you can really see it. So I had this grant that's going to be included in this, and I just posted a draft of the final report that doesn't have all the pictures moved over to it yet on my website, which will be on handouts, which Anna was supposed to make and bring here. Uh-oh. Well, we'll have a break and I'll find Anna, right? So our grant was mostly making a demo area in the woods of air meadow canopy harvest, doing the whole acre. And it was crazy because it was, 56-year-old growth, so we were using ropes a lot. But it also had an understory of smaller trees, so everything got pollarded. And I also got this little mini grant for lab analysis, which I mentioned, which that report will happen by January. But I do have some results, I just haven't looked at them thoroughly. Josh and Emily were my interns. Josh did almost half the climbing last summer, and then I continued by myself all winter. Mason came from California for 1 week and only wanted a bill hook for pay, and he already had climbing skills. Various other people climbed trees. Eric was my technical advisor. He's in Camden. He's a chestnut guy, etc. Karen helped me actually submit the grant when I couldn't look at the computer screen, etc., etc., etc. These other guys were arborists who taught me in the last 2 years of various knots and whatnot. And then a lot of these people are people who helped me translate literature over the years in German and Norwegian and Swedish. I think actually Norwegian she didn't get up there. Anyways, it's been a big community effort for me to have this little body of knowledge on this obscure subject. So there's Dr. Seuss. These pollarded trees are everywhere once you start knowing what they are.
Pollard just means you cut it off and then it grows back and you use it again.
Yeah, and so coppicing would be cutting at the ground, and you get multiple sprouts that make a big blob of shade. Pollarding is anything up above browse height, and you get lollipop shade that moves during the day, so you can have crops right up to it. And pollards can be all kinds of shapes and sizes, you'll see. So I wanted to step back and just say on the planetary level, I really think what I'm doing is, partly driven by pure inspiration and instinct and relationships with animals and trees. And a lot of it is because I really feel really strongly that we need to do this stuff. And so I went to conferences and presentations and this and that, and I have a lot of statistical information. And this is some of it. So I was with Walter Yega for 4 days in Vermont in August. And he and John Norman is an environmental biophysicist. They figured out on paper from data from other references that the evapotranspiration, first of all, the evapotranspiration of plants is like 95% of the climate disruption. We've basically stripped the living surfaces of the planet of greenery and soil, and the carbon sequestration is really extra important as far as putting it into soil because that fosters greenery, and it regulates water. And the trees regulate the water cycles of the rain in huge ways. There's a lot of literature on that. Some of it is listed in my refs on my website, which will be on the handout that I'll find later. I forgot to look for the handouts here when I came in. So anyway, we need a huge amount of increase of greenery in the next 10 years for the planet to keep going with the species that we have, including ourselves. And this is what they computed. So if we just focus on farmland, which is actually the most likely of those three scenarios, because farmers are real doers, worldwide we need 23% increase. Now starting with a tilled cornfield that's bare a good bit of the year, that's not too hard to switch over. But the bottom line is we need to eat in a different way, and we need to stop losing soil at, I think Gabe Brown says this country's losing 10 to 12 tons per ton of food, and Alan Savory says 8 to 10 worldwide tons of food lost for every ton of food produced. So, when they did the little drainage things, when Faye came and our extension agents had us come to a little soil presentation with a little runoff table with the various trays with different things growing in them, they couldn't do a forest. But they did do, taller grass that's properly grazed versus like no-till agriculture for vegetables versus overgrazed. And the runoff in the properly grazed goes all into the storage, and the runoff on, the bare ground goes all into the front, and it's completely cloudy full of soil. And woodlands even better. And fields that traditionally had pollards all through them, trees that were made not to make very much shade, but they were feeding the ground layer every time you cut them with the root dieback. That increases your permeability for water infiltration, and it increases your water storage capacity, which all increases the greenery. So it puts carbon into the soil, and then you get more greenery, and then you get more evapotranspiration, and the planet is back to maybe a living state. So anyway, so that's kind of behind why I do all this so passionately, because I do love life and living things. Oh yeah, so here I have more slides about it. I haven't looked at these for 2 weeks. I gave them to Anna early because she wanted them. So just to explain how that works, green plants, the infrared is the heat-making portion of the sun rays, and 70% of that goes into the evapotranspiration and just is held in the moisture, and it's not heat at that point, it's just the energy is in that vapor and lets out the heat when it condenses, which is usually away from the surface of the planet. And 30%, the other 30% keeps us from being an ice ball planet. This is a wonderful old pollard. They're all over Europe. A friend sent that picture because he took it. So yeah, bacteria released from mature trees. Stomata seed a lot of the rain clouds. Most of the rain clouds, depends what region you're in, not much. And a lot of the rain itself, some regions it's up to 90% of the rain itself actually came out of the evapotranspiration of the plants, not like evaporated off the ocean. So this is a David Dilla drawing, French guy. So here's a traditional one-head pollard, you know, the kinds that would be all through the fields of crops and hayland and pastures all over Europe for so many thousands of years. And there they have deep enough soil apparently that that tree can be quite a bit below the crop. And they're mutually beneficial. And the trees were seen as the fertility of the field. They're also leaving their leaves, dropping their leaves every year that you're not harvesting the tops. But there's also this root dieback. Ingvild Austad, it's a biologist in Norway, who sent me a study about chipped infiled leaves, which helped me to get the SARE grant. But she has studied a lot about the soil under pollards and that nitrogen release when the roots die back. And literature about forestry that doesn't know about pollarding says that root turnover on trees is the best assurance against waterlogging of soil. So, okay, because we said extending the grazing season as the title, I thought I better put this stuff in. So, as far as making your pasture last further into the season, and this got covered fairly well yesterday afternoon by Kimberly and Elliot, but the soil humus that we're talking about, all that carbon in the soil that the trees put in, and the grass does too if you graze it properly, improves drainage and water retention. If you mow or browse in July and you get some rain and stuff still grows, if you're able not to use that grass until later, it will stand and you can graze right until they can't get through the snow anymore. Biodiversity of plants helps pastures take green longer, and I will say when the pollards are there, you know, under that tree, it's likely to delay. You saw that place that was delaying seeding at my place, just having that.
We saw that, yeah.
Yeah. Which is a big plug for agroforestry. The agroforesters here in the U.S. are mostly focused on, you know, saw logs, and they're producing wood and then a livestock product. My agroforestry would be more your grazing, browsing, pruning, pollarding. You're feeding the tree matter and the grass layer. And the saw logs might be here and there, but they're not the focus. And that you have much more control over sun to your grass layer. And the trouble with the agroforestry model of just having the trees felled is it's really hard. The regeneration part is really hard with the livestock around. And I can talk afterwards. There's a guy in an agroforestry group that meets quarterly, Northeast agroforestry group that Kimberly's also part of. That tested a lot of what's available for protecting young trees when you're trying to get them into your pasture, and figured out what was cost effective. So we should talk about that. And then there's always throwing some annual cold-loving plants in, especially if an area gets bare for some reason, and then feeding it out late when the grass is dwindling. And actually, Kimberly yesterday pointed out that so when you plant brassicas, the grass has this big hump in June, and then starts tapering down late July, and in August it's really low, and that's just when the brassicas are getting really good. So you send them in to graze then, at that, so it kind of complements the grass. And then the grass starts maybe growing again when it starts raining in the fall, but then it gets low again, and then and in that time while they're grazing the grass again, your brassicas often will regrow, especially if you plant certain ones that you can talk to your extension agents what ones to plant for forage. do with things that aren't woody plants. And there's probably more things that I don't know. So this is a kind of a jump to a whole other world of livestock production that is really increasing ground in Europe, again, and was thousands of years of the normal way to do things. So does anyone get to do this during these things during the growing season much? And if you don't, this is recommendation of Maria Provenza. Apparently when animals are herded, as in having a person go with them and have a give and take as far as where you go and when, there's more plant diversity, and this is why the French government wants things herded. You know, public lands need to be herded in Europe because they stopped it. They put a big public campaign to get people to fence, save time, use fencing. And they did that for 30 years from 1960 to 1990. And the landscape all kind of went to hell, wasn't as biodiverse, wasn't as green and rich, and soil was deteriorating, and then they were like, okay, that was a mistake. And now they have 5 herding schools in France. And mostly urban people are getting trained, and they're getting trained by knowledgeable herders, experienced herders. And you can go there and get trained, and you can get a job because they are not producing, there's more of a demand than a supply of herders. It's a lot of hours, the job, and pays okay, but not when you look at the hours. And I've heard that Norway, EU also, Europe, that I could go there and have a job as a goat herd very easily, that they're also having the same kind of thing happen. So increased biodiversity in the landscape, but also the animals eat like more than a third more than if they're in a rotational paddock. And that's pretty intuitive for someone who wanders around with goats, because it's just obvious that, oh, they're full now, but we can go over there, and they're like, oh yeah, let's have some of that. And then they eat some. It's like if you go to a smorgasbord, you're going to eat twice as much versus sitting in front of one plate. So anyway, and I just put this in that I really think that pretty soon they're going to figure out that happiness in the animal transfers into happiness in you when you eat the food. And that all these depressed animals in boxes are probably part of the psychological problems of our culture. And so that was my goats out on a goat walk. That's a clear cut behind us that I have in my certification plan. And this is also on a goat walk. Just to say, you know, we go to such diverse places. Oops, wrong way. And this is also on our goat walks. And what months do you think that is? That's April 2017. They're finding the acorns that they missed. There were so many in 2016, and there's quite a bit this year. And this is also, just in case I didn't already tell you about the grazing rule, that counts as grazing if they're even under the tree. So there's ways to use woody plants that aren't my pollarding in my crazy air meadow with my ropes to climb. I have a friend in England who may come and may do a MOFGA workshop. We'll see if we can get him to buy the plane ticket before it gets too expensive. If he comes, it would be like 1st of May. Because you want to do hedging when there's no leaves, and I'm thinking in Maine we might have an issue of wintering these things that you really cut a lot off of at the bases to bend. It might be better to do it in spring versus fall. In Ithaca, New York, there will be 2 workshops in 2 weekends, and Steve Gabriel is organizing those, and there's 2 hedge laying people coming.
I think I saw that actually.
Yep. Yeah, I'm going to be at one of them. So I'm going to get, and I already had a lesson in England.
I was just in Norway for 2 weeks, and in Oslo they have they call a heritage museum, and they've literally brought buildings from all different time periods in Norway into one area. So you're walking through, 800-year-old farms, and the buildings are still there in their original layout. They brought
Nice.
whole homesteads and then all different parts of Norway, so you can see how different regions were farming in the same area
Right.
or same time period. And we took a
Hedges.
ton of pictures of fencing and hedging options and the ways that they were, because they actually had sheep and pigs and some other livestock.
And And they were keeping
in
them in
this
with
area.
the hedges.
Yeah, some of
Yeah.
it was that, some of it was the hedges and some of the older homesteads, but then there were some other fencing options that were
Yeah.
something we don't see in the US, so
Nice.
that was,
I'd love to see the pictures.
yeah, I'll see what I've got on my phone.
Yeah, post them somewhere and then send a
Yeah.
link to people. So this is the recommended hedging book recommended by my friend Paul Hand in England, who professionally lays hedges. He's not an expert, he's just a good hedge layer. He worked with an expert for years, he is now retired. And the reason I am talking about hedges is because they're not just for fencing in the animals, they also feed the animals, and when your grass dries up in August, that can be when you prune your hedge. You're not going to relay it then, that the laying it happens like once every 6 or 7 years, but you still can definitely prune it and feed it to the animals. And depending what it is, so I picked things that, so this column is things that my goats do not strip generally, but they do eat the leaves seasonally, mostly seasonally. And this side is things that they're more likely to strip the bark off of or eat more readily, or too readily. Locust, I could never make a hedge out of locust because they would just devour it way too much. And hawthorn probably, but hawthorn has the thorns, so it's very traditional. So I was looking in the book, and then I was looking at my species, and that's what I would make attempts with to make good hedges here. So there's Ron Smart, who is the very expert hedge layer that my friend Paul Hand worked with for years, but now Ron is retired. But this is before he retired, and he's laying a hedge that's 50-year-old. He's hired to do this by a park. 50-year-old hazel, so very overgrown, neglected hedges getting relayed. And there it is. And there it is. It still hasn't been bound. They're going to put binders at the top, leaving to hold it down, kind of, but pretty much enough. That's what it's done. And then we don't have a picture of it getting green, but it'll grow straight up, lots and lots and lots of sprouts, and just be very dense. So, and hazel is just a fall fodder for us. But the buck goats like it better than the others. I'm not sure about the cow. It wasn't in my study because we were just doing trees in the study. This is Karen Whitman's place. She also helped me submit the grant. Just pasting things onto the website. So they just last spring planted, what's that?
This is on your website?
This whole presentation will be afterwards, not immediately, but when I get to it within the next couple weeks.
Yeah.
Yes. So these are the species that she chose, but these are not going to be a hedge. She's got metal fencing that she's planning to maintain, and it's big enough holes that they can it's like cattle panels, they can stick their noses through, and this is for sheep. So, and a couple other, I don't know if people can see the species or...
What's her goal there?
For them to have fodder banks of stuff to eat, to balance the grass, or be there when other things aren't. And some of those things aren't going to grow that fast, and some of them are going to grow really well fast. It'll be interesting to watch it over the years. And so their little plants are actually here, but they're just little, you can't see them, but that's what the fence looks like. So that's like between two paddocks, this row that has plants planted that will get bigger. And there's a sheep, in 10 years they'll be able to eat those plants. Or their progeny will be able to. And so this is in Costa Rica, but it had Jackson doing vertical storage, and then he put a tarp around it, and he wrapped the rope down again. That's what we did at the demo area. We just basically stacked them with the branches out so the goats wouldn't reach under the pile so much. This is our chip stuff.
Is any of this silage or just storage? What are you showing back there? Anything?
Silage, dry.
Okay.
Silage, him making it in
Yeah,
the
in the barrel. Okay.
barrel. This is size
Wow.
picture with, he's just putting some
Oh.
branch material that he
Oh.
collects into his external rumen of his backpack while he's on a goat walk, and you can maybe layer it in with the hay or have its own stack in your barn. Here's a guy doing that in Austria. I thought you'd like this site. You gotta look real quick.
Oh yeah,
In
that looks pretty similar.
Which is Michael Machacek, Laubgeschichten is the book.
Wow.
And this is Håkon Slott's doctoral study pictures from museums. And those are all sheaves of twigs.
Twigs and
like this, about a meter long,
Just twigs and leaves.
twigs and leaves. Leafy twigs. This is spruce boughs on top for the rain.
Ah,
That one sticks out, a little bit of a hollow middle, pull up the middle, and then they reverse the leaves out on the top for the rain. But some stacks like that have spruce boughs on top and more square shoulders. That's probably going to end up in the barn. That's just temporary, probably. And so up in northern Sweden, strip leaf, pick leaf was a thing, like late fall, pop the ash leaves off just before they fall. Maybe they were too busy when they were raking blueberries to do the cut twigs, so they did their harvest in the fall. This is cherry tree before, but it had been pollarded before, and cherry tree after. I just was like, okay, it's only 2-year growth, but I want it shorter, and they were eating a lot of cherry, and there it was fall. That's a black cherry, just a wild tree in my pasture. So these are trees before and after. So 2 ashes, 1, 2 is heads, and that's these 2 trees. The birch probably isn't going to do anything, and we chopped its bark along the trunk, and it's still not sprouting there either. These are the 2 ashes. There you go, bonkers. Ashes are really good. But they don't always do it where you expect them to. This one's going lower down. That one held its leaves the longest of any of the ashes, though. Okay, more before and after pictures. So this is that same poplar on the leaf pile that's so lush. But what we were looking at is this crazy oak. It's been pollarded before. It's next to the pond on the edge of the road near my pasture. And, oops, I went the wrong way. I'm sorry, I pushed the wrong button. So that's it pollarded, and then it sprouted great, but the caterpillars went crazy this summer. And there's a closer look. You can see how well it's sprouting right near the ends, like it's supposed to, so that it can close over those balls eventually. But we'll see. I've had other trees get hit hard and recover bit by bit. It seems to be worse the first year on the oaks, but everything was more intense insect-wise this year. That's before, after, as Josh and that tree pictured earlier, and there it is now, basically. This tree has been done multiple times. It's in my yard. There it is again, different years. This is another tree. But you can see there's really good, like, quick first-year growth on this, or maybe that's 2-year growth now, but that's like in a goat yard where there's a lot of poop.
I was just going to ask, would spreading manure around,
Totally,
like
and
in like a ring
brush
around
piles help, and anything that's moisture
Lot of
retention
green
and
growth.
anything that's nitrogen, yes, much better sprouting. And that's one of those oaks that was in that tree line in the first title thing, holding its leaves green. Next directions, see, we're already at the end. So you can scale up. I want to have someone make a leaf rake of really strong spring tooth tines, like just like rakes. That the tree gets drawn through into Elliot Mimpesky's chipper with
Wait,
the
the
PTO.
limb gets,
The limb, as you feed it into the
Yes,
chipper,
okay.
it goes through this other thing
Okay.
first, it sucks the leaves to the side, and that way you're not ensiling all those chipped pieces of wood that brings the nutrition down and takes more space in your ensiling method.
So when you're doing this, you don't actually want the wood chips in an ideal world.
Well, because they're great bedding, but if I only have so much barrel space or so much time to pack it into a bunker of 3 sides, and put the tarps over.
oh, wait, you said they don't prefer it, and yet what Jackie just said is that was traditional to feed that kind of.
Not the chipped. It was traditional to feed raked leaves ensiled or stripped leaves ensiled.
I think she said woody material.
Some woody material, but small woody material.
Yeah, just snapping
Not-
off twigs.
Not
but I was
like-
going
not
down
the
to an
bigger
inch.
diameter stuff. They
I was
weren't.
going down to an inch.
Are wood chippers traditional?
Well, no.
Well, I mean, you could use a machete and chop stuff up, and in a
Yeah.
tropical country or
No,
off
I know
of
what you're
pollards,
Yeah.
off of pollards when you've got vigorous, juicy growth, and you're doing, say, a 3-year cycle, it wouldn't be so bad to have the wood in there. And the goats and the sheep would actually suck on the woody pieces and make them kind of round. The cows, if it was fine, the cows would just eat the whole thing. If it was not fine, then the goats and the sheep liked it better because they could take the leaves out. Like in the shredding side, it made bigger pieces, and that was better for them because they like to pick out. And that's what Ingvild Alstead said in their study, is the sheep were more picking out, and then the rest went to bedding. They tested it for bedding. It was really good bedding.
Do you want to circle around
So-
now?
Yeah, let's circle around. So, and the scaling scam idea is like, okay, well, my milk, I have no trouble selling illegal milk. I don't advertise, and it's just so amazingly healthy and unique when you have half tree leaves in your milk that people start thinking that maybe it's worth hauling up out of the well, bringing to their jars, you know, and paying twice as much. And there's all, you know, things that could happen for that is that nobody's really, you know, they're starting to look at grass-fed and the difference in nutrition, and nobody's really looking at yet all these plant compounds that are in trees that are so medicinal that get right into the milk. Pretty much everything the animal eats goes almost immediately into the milk. So like when I milk, I'm getting the plants that they ate since I last milked. But nobody's really looked at those and promoted, you know, that might be healthy. But that's what people ate for 8,000 years. So that's why our bodies need that stuff, because we used to get that. Because animals ate leaves all winter, you know, for thousands of years before grass hay was able to be cut. Because people were doing it with stone axes, people were breaking things by hand. Leaves were stored 6,000 years ago in Switzerland for cows, because they found the leaf piles, you know. And they were probably stored before that. So, yeah, so there's things that could be done as far as the value of this. And to me, you know, the consumer model isn't going to make that greenery on the planet that we need. You don't have the soil loops close enough. Like, we need more people hands-on producing their food. We don't need more consumers. We need to stop idolizing the sedentary lifestyle and rewarding the farmers for how many people can you keep sitting on their butts that have food without having to farm? You know, like I think we need to become more of a farming culture, in which case the whole idea of, you know, scaling up and things being too labor intensive, yet we have more unemployment and more people on the planet than ever before. Why can't we do these things that we did for 8,000 years? So anyway, it's a big cultural thing that I think in the next 10 years we have to start navigating if we're going to get the surface of the planet healthy. Okay. Everybody else gets to talk now.
I am particularly interested in what you were talking about with sheep and goats. I'm sorry, sheep and pigs, because that's what I keep.
Okay. And we should go around and say a little more about your farming. Just say a little more about your farming.
We breed and raise Navajo Churro sheep and a couple different breeds of pigs. We sell piglets. We sell meat. I have yet to get the time to put a garden in. But we do have access to about 3 acres of woods that we have used on and off for pigs and occasionally sheep, but not with purpose. And we are hoping to have access to another 10-acre woodlot in the next few months. So this seminar, based on the name, was not what I thought it was, but it's super duper interesting. And I'm actually really interested in this idea of the anaerobic fermentation, because I have a whole bunch of those blue sealable barrels that I'm not using for cleaning as much anymore. So the idea that I could go out this week and try a miniature version of this project for feeding my sheep and pigs over the winter. So I guess I'd like to hear a little bit more about that and what you found.
Also fill them with acorns.
And the acorns was the other thing where my feeders are not really going for the acorns. They're there and they eat some of them, but like it's just not been their thing this year. So I could go out and do that as well. So I'd like to hear a little bit more about what you've observed on some of these test sites for those species anyway.
My name is Phoebe, and raised sheep, pigs, and cows, dairy cows. And we're in the process. We have about 14 acres of pretty poor pasture land right now, and have just cleared 12 acres. It was treated like 100 years ago. It was sheep grazing land, but right now it's like very acidic and very poor, and the trees are pretty weak and tall. So I'm interested in like, is coppicing something that will like get the roots really strong, or like because they're in the wind has been like so terrible, and they're all down right now. But I'm interested in like in a rotational grazing system or in like a system where you are having to rely on like a paddock and not so much like walking around or
Right.
herding with your
Not
animals.
pastoral herding.
How can you kind of, how can you make
And
this
people do
scale back?
combinations of those two things also,
Yeah.
even
Yeah.
infants.
My name's Lisa. I was a veggie farmer, but we just sort of moved to this area a couple years ago and got goats on a small scale. Friends, sheep graze on our land, and a lot of our, got about 15 open acres, but some of it is kind of brushy. Yeah, and I'm having a hard time getting fencing through a lot of the
Brushy
brushy
places?
yeah, wooded areas, and I just want to figure out how to utilize them better for our goats, and we only have 5, so it's not like a huge operation.
I have 7 right now, goats.
Yeah.
We're similar.
Yeah, so I just like love them and I want them to be healthy.
Hi, I'm Jack. I'm landscape coordinator in the MOFGA grounds and have nothing to do with animals personally. It's called a hate of you, but this is an opportunity I see to educate people about techniques that look like pretty low tech, but also problem solving. And it's like, oh, we're going to take advantage of this that we already have. It sounds pretty good and multifaceted. So what if I'm not a producer of animal?
You're in the landscape and you care about it.
I have a landscape that I can come and collect the pollarded material, but I don't care. The pollarded thing is not going to influence necessarily in a negative way anything I'm going underneath it. So it's a complementary.
Yeah, it's probably going to
It's
encourage it.
complementary agriculture that's really it's time to promote it.
My name's Megan, and we have a small handful of heritage pigs and a small handful of Dexter cows. And 2 or so years ago, fenced in, we had some loggers come in and had them, since they were there, we had them clear cut behind the barn so we could fence it in. I'm just kind of interested in this because I happen to notice in June when the cows went from their behind the barn half acre of what I thought was nothing out to pasture. Geez, they look fat.
That they did better on it than
I
expected.
think they got a lot more out of those poplar sprouts than I realized.
Yeah, and when they're new, their choice. They seem to have a time when they're fairly well defended. The big poplars, when you cut the tops, the animals always want it. But the young sprouts in our clear cut, there's a lot of times when they don't want it. They seem fairly defended. But when they're young and new, they really do want it
Yeah.
in the spring.
Yeah.
And then they'll eat the side leaves sometimes.
Yeah.
The others. And if you cut them, they'll still eat them in their paddock. But
Yeah.
it's not like first choice on the wall.
My name's Cy, and I have originally cows and goats and chickens, and soon to be sheep and no more cows. And yeah, I've just started pollarding in the past couple of years since I started talking to Shana.
I think it's only been like a year and a half.
The 2 seasons.
Last summer.
Yeah. And I was already really obsessed with making loose hay, and so I'm really having a lot of fun with how,
Gourmet,
yeah,
I may say.
yeah, how you can combine leaf fodder storage with loose hay storage. And, to get back to what Jack was saying about, like, Jack doesn't even have any animals, but one of the other things that I'm pollarding for is for poles. It's where the word,
For your side.
comes from, that make snads and business selling sides and make the wooden components to go with them. So, you can
Oh, your side. We're
Yeah.
friends with John O'Meara.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Good, great.
Did you buy that Jersey cow from Appleton?
No,
No,
sorry,
okay,
no.
never mind. Yeah, I have cows
tall ash with a fair amount of branching that's pollarded in Austria, and he says it's by a hostel and they don't have animals anymore, but they're still pollarding it after it never got stopped because they're using it for firewood. And the Basque folks that I saw when I was in France for that pollarding conference, they had a lot of trees they pollarded simply for firewood, and then the ashes got pollarded for fodder. And the ship parts were a thing, making the shapes you needed on pollards.
How big are they letting how big are the branches capable of getting before
And
they
still
cut
get-
them for firewood? Because that's
Depends on the
fascinating to
species.
use a live stand instead of
Right,
cutting
because
them down.
it's actually more efficient to make the wood, you know,
Yeah.
because it's already established.
I don't know that I'm with this 10-acre wood
and it
lot.
can be
I'm
right
trying
next to your
think
house,
about,
you
like,
know?
what's the best way to manage it and not make 20-year mistakes, you know?
Yeah,
So,
you have a lot of choices.
Yeah.
And so I will say the extreme case that I know of is that Helen Reid's tour of 8 countries in 2008, 3? Anyway, I think it might be in your references. Someone in Romania told her they were pollarding the beaches on a 50-year cycle. And it was either for charcoal or firewood. 50! But also, the pollard guide that I have posted there that's Spanish Basque country, that talks about the trasmochos, which are oaks. Also, they made new pollards in conjunction with Helen Reid and ones that are excited about this in England. They all came together and repollarded it, and they just lopped the beaches right off at their 3 or 4 meters. Huge cuts, and they're doing okay because they're beaches. You know, and they're in the Basque country where maybe the weather's pretty good. I don't know. So there's a wide range of what was done. And then softwoods. Someone asked about softwoods. So they used to not pollard, but prune spruce trees that were like 200 feet high, and they used to even sometimes use spikes, like traditionally. And everything I've read says they were doing it for animal bedding, but it looks like Norway spruce in the picture. And my goats love Norway spruce, especially in the spring. So I have one Norway spruce that happens to be on the sunny side of the apple trees, so it needs to be pruned. So you wanted to know more about sheep and hogs.
And I guess this fermentation process here.
Yeah, and so the sheep, and so let me say, you know, grass silage can be dangerous for sheep. There's some kind of like encephalitis that happens. Do people know more about that?
Depends on
Sumner could
the
tell us
color
about
of the mold that you see
Okay.
in there.
Okay,
The-
it's when it gets some dirt in it or something, or gets some air.
I don't know, the white mold in grass silage is totally fine.
Right, just like on
Black,
trees.
they generally consider unpalatable, and then people say red is dead. I don't have any experience with that, but
Right,
I
good.
wouldn't feed an animal red molds on it.
Yeah.
Good to know. Thank you for clarifying. What I found out from somebody was that when that happens, it's from like soil microbes that go bad. And so when you're doing tree stuff, maybe it's not as much of an issue. I know they were feeding the ensiled stuff to sheep in Norway in Ingvild's study, which I think is in your reference list. Lausum reserves or something. And the 2-page English summary of that is on my website, I think. Under resources is where you find all these things that other people wrote.
When you're in the orchard picking apples, if you drop a leaf, they'll gobble it right up.
Oh yeah, the leaves are like better than the apples.
They are, they will.
But Susan's sheep won't eat apple. Susan Littlefield's at Why Not Farm. And her sheep would much rather have spruce than white cedar. Like, different animal groups are different, or maybe her soil's different, and those spruce trees are extra happy at her place. And maybe the cedars aren't, I don't know.
What breeds of pigs are you raising?
Mostly large black and Mangalitsa cross. We
Cool.
do have a pair of Idaho pasture pig and American guinea hog, but I think the American guinea hog is not breeding, and that's just not working for us. So
Yeah.
she's probably sausage, and he's probably just a charming pet pig.
Yeah.
But
Because he's too stinky for
But
sausage.
Mangalitsa,
could be. I haven't had issues with Fortain in the past.
Oh, really?
I have.
I have tasted a bad 14.
we
Yeah.
have not. We've eaten a lot of boar.
not to get too off topic, but I did process a Mangalitsa boar, and I had to hold back the fat back just in case, and he was 2 at the time, and it wasn't an issue. And we also had to make sausage and chorizo out of it, so it was like, well, I figured dodge that bullet as thoroughly as I could, and it wasn't an issue. But we haven't pushed that envelope too hard. But yeah, I don't know. We're still kind of deciding whether or not we're gonna like push pause on the pig breeding program, because it's definitely the most consuming endeavor on our farm, and maybe
Consuming in what manner?
all
Time, your time?
money, time, effort, our
Inputs.
pasture space, yeah, but also we're hoping to have a child next summer, and that's we're trying to decide like what does our farming
cut
day
out.
look like
Yeah.
next summer for it to be sane, and maybe we come back to pigs in 2 years. We're kind of like we're loath to do it because we've worked so hard with these genetics, but then also we're trying to be realistic, so we'll see. Yeah, it's been good for us.
So you have a lot of different, you have quite a bit of livestock going on. Not a huge open land, or, so is it, did you clear 12 acres in addition to the 14 acres? Okay, so that is pretty good size then.
But this is year 1 of the new pasture, and we grazed it for like all of a week and a half, 2 weeks. There was almost nothing. We seeded a lot, but just it was like the lime absorption or whatever hasn't really fully
Right,
gotten things where they
right,
need
and
to
the manure hasn't built up enough.
be. No, yeah.
And so you're bringing in hay to make up that deficit, or what's happening?
We've been feeding out some hay, but we sent more lambs off to slaughter than we were planning, and just like made some
Right,
cutbacks in the
downsized.
space. Yeah.
Yeah, and what's your woodland?
The area that
Oh yeah, and you had the bushes too, so,
I think bushes.
oh no, bushes was you, okay.
It's mostly softwood in that area. It's almost exclusively softwood in that
Mostly
area.
fir and pine? So they eat some fir and pine, and they actually, the last couple of years, they've really liked stripping bark on the top part of a fir, or a juicy part of a fir that's usually near the top of the tree, and not every tree, but, younger wood. And they actually want to strip the bark on it in the spring more than eat the needles. But of course, most people's goats would just eat the whole dead Christmas tree because they don't get enough tree matter. My goats are pretty more selective.
Does coppicing, like
And-
you're talking about all this amazing, like a wellspring of energy coming up in branches where you cut, is that also like without all the branches and leaves extending into root systems as well? Like you're
So what happens is when you cut, the roots die back to balance,
okay.
and then when it regrows, they regrow. So you get this new carbon material down there that's then composting and also staying and fostering all kinds of soil life. And then you've got new roots stimulated to really grow actively, just like the top is. So you're stimulating growth on both ends, and you're leaving, like on top you're taking away stuff, but on bottom you're not taking it away. It's staying in the soil when that harvest happens.
Interesting.
Yeah.
About that root dieback thing, that's something that had been, talked about a lot, both in like also in pasture management, as like how carbon's being sequestered. And then in the past few years, kind of, I don't know, whatever, leading researchers have been steering away from saying that this root sloughing is actually desirable. I mean, it's inevitable, but that actually what's putting the most carbon into the soil is not the root sloughing that occurs. It's actually the photosynthase that the plants are intentionally feeding to all their partners.
Right.
Because like most of the, I forget what the numbers are, but like when they're like the plants top themselves up with carbohydrates.
It's like
even-
60%.
Yeah, even before they do that, they're feeding a tremendous amount of carbohydrates to soil life, like fungi and micro animals. Yeah, and that's actually the more important source of carbon to the soil.
Right, and all those little guys are made out of carbon equals life. And the carbon sequestration isn't the biggest piece, it's the soil enrichment and the growth.
So potentially underplanting around trees that you're coppicing or something like that. Like
Might
you
be
could,
successful.
You could intentionally plant something around it to try and encourage that. And that would be encouraging more carbon
Make use.
sequestration. Yeah.
Yeah, well, the more layers of greenery, the better, and the less bare soil, the better. More for your animals to eat, the
There's-
better.
You'll be happy to know there's a lot more cover cropping in Aroostook County of chemical farmers, by chemical
Yes.
farmers.
Yeah. That's
You see,
so
you
good.
just see, I think as they're getting out of grain, because there's no money in grain, you see lots of tillage radish, and then also this fine grass that I don't know what it is.
That's good to hear.
Yep.
Must look good to be around too, when
Yeah.
you're driving around. That's great. So, and you have, the bushy pastures, what are this, and where it's hard to get fencing through,
Yeah, well,
and
we've
what are your
got,
species there?
we've got,
Thank you very much.
yeah, thank you, kind of a mix.
Does anyone want to leave any contact information, or, you've got mine.
I've got yours, thank you so much.
It's kind of hard to describe what we have, but it's a mix of like open land with like very acidic pasture. It's got a lot of like goldenrod and stuff that sheep don't like in it. And then there's like strips of like, there's a stream and then like a kind of riparian buffer zone with all kinds of wooded, I don't know, there's like poplar and there's oak in there. But then we also have 30 acres that's like swampy, soft wood, can't get into it. I don't know what to do with it.
Uh-huh.
Cedar? Some cedar, yeah.
Is there sensitive fern, the ones that have a,
There is some
like a hand
sensitive
up
fern.
here and a stem to it?
Yeah, there is in some areas.
That is high desirable fodder,
The goats have really been enjoying that.
and it lasts in droughts sometimes.
Yeah,
Because